Your kid is sitting behind Starbucks in a motor vehicle smoking pot, and then he's going to drive that motor vehicle, and he could kill one of my kids or kill somebody else, and you want me to just get the case thrown out because you think there's entrapment?
I'm a former Detroit police officer and rode with the One Percenter Motorcycle Club. During that time, I was involved in a lot of altercations. I had a gun shoved in my face. The trigger was pulled, and I got a plate under my left eye. I'm Manny Vitale, and this is my story. Hi, everybody. How you doing? Welcome to another episode of My Fight or War. We are joined today by Richard Hastings, who's an attorney and who has just a numerous amount of information that could help us in just so many different ways. So, Richard, thank you for coming on. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Manny.
And, we were just chit-chatting a little bit about certain things. And, I'm like, well, we got to save this for this show. So, first of all, thank you. And why don't you just, introduce yourself? Let us know where you're from, what you do, and, all these amazing things that are going on.
Certainly. I practice personal injury law in Ridgefield, Connecticut. I've been doing that for about 40 years. I practice in the town I grew up in. I raised my children in this town, and it's been an amazing place to live. And as a result of what I do, I see a lot of pain, a lot of tragedy, a lot of death. So it's a very sobering occupation. And part of what we do is we're called attorneys and counselors at law, and there is a huge counseling part to this.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, you can't have one without the other. I mean, you're going to put a Band-Aid on a surgical wound. Mm-hmm. So the things that you have seen, and, we all have those stories that are those aha stories. And then you get the ones that, people think that aren't so intense, but actually those are the stories that touch some people the most. What has, in your career, which has been an amazing career, what have you seen that has really kind of just opened your eyes to what the outcome can be when you're making these wrong decisions?
Of course. And, it's funny, we call these accidents. Somebody's been involved in an accident. Somebody's been hurt in an accident. But many times they're not accidents. You don't accidentally drive your car at 90 miles an hour. You don't accidentally get drunk and then drive your car. You don't accidentally talk on your cell phone and get involved in an accident. These are not accidents. These are things that people do and get bad results. So it's important for people to know that there are horrific consequences that can result from some very, very bad decisions. And the cases for me that are the most impactful certainly are where there is either the death of an individual or the incredibly serious injury of an individual. And when you look at these situations, the person that caused that is so remorseful and so contrite, and they keep saying, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. But it gets back to the fact that you've made some very, very bad decisions.
Richard, you just said something that I never even thought of. We call them accidents. And I never even thought about that's what we call them, but that's not what it was. That was an action that was caused of an action that we chose to do as operating that vehicle under the influence. Operating that vehicle while texting, all these things. So, yes, the outcome was an accident, but it was because of an action of what we did. So, thank you for opening my eyes.
And it's important that people understand that, because every single person that causes one of these horrific accidents will always say, I had no idea, or I didn't think, or if I had only known, when in fact everybody has an idea. Everybody will think of this, and everybody knows that if you're intoxicated, for example, you're not going to be able to maneuver the car as well as you should if you're sober. If you're doing 90 miles an hour, it is much more difficult to stop the vehicle or to steer the vehicle. If you're driving while you're on your cell phone, or if you're not paying attention for some other reason, the chances of getting involved in an accident go up exponentially. And one of the things I heard is that if you look down at your cell phone traveling 60 miles an hour for 1 second, you have traveled the length of one football field.
That's just incredible when you think about 1 second.
1 second. And by the time you look up, who knows what would have happened?
And when as an attorney you hear these cases, and it's almost like we try to justify the outcome by using our actions as a defense. Mm-hmm. Well, except for the drinking, of course, but it wasn't my fault. I just answered my phone for a second, or I just looked at the text just for a second, but I really didn't do anything wrong. So almost, taking away from the responsibility by using the actions that we did.
And people have to do that to some way, kind of justify the fact that somebody's seriously injured and it's not really their fault. And the only way they can do that is by saying, I only had, and I used to do, DUI work. Every single person that came to my office that was arrested for DUI had the exact same amount of alcohol to drink. 2 beers. I only had 2 beers. Everyone had 2 beers. You get their blood alcohol level, they had to have 60 beers. And there's several things that are accidents. Like, for example, if a deer runs out in your car, in front of your car, and you swerve to avoid hitting the deer, or somebody comes into your lane of travel and you swerve to avoid hitting them, that would be an accident. But there's also in Connecticut what's called the sudden emergency doctrine, which means that if you take evasive action when you're confronted with an emergency and you make a bad decision, that you're not held to that bad decision because you have to do something suddenly. Whether you turn to the left or turn to the right, you make the decision which you think at the moment is in your best interest. So those are accidents. Everything else that we discussed is not an accident. And when you hear about somebody getting injured in a motor vehicle, generally those things involve some type of intentional conduct.
That's just thinking about the way that you said that. And, I'm 59 years old, and I've definitely had issues with, obviously, substance abuse and all that as well. But it's still the way that you put that is we call it an accident, but it's not it's the end result of actions that we've taken. And the way that we justify it is by doing such. And like you said, though, an accident is, well, you just explained. Okay. But yet we're still trying to justify, I only had 2 beers, so something was wrong there, and the way we try to get out of it. With all the cases that you've seen, has there been any type of a common denominator or something that besides the 2 beer theory, that you hear from people that maybe people could relate to?
I think just as an umbrella, I would call it irresponsible conduct. Okay. So drivers of vehicles that engage in any type of irresponsible conduct, like we were talking about, speeding, drinking, drugging, drowsy driving, distracted driving, all of those things, or any one of those things, can greatly increase your likelihood of being involved in an accident, which isn't an accident. You've caused this through your intentional conduct. Because like I said, nobody accidentally drinks too much alcohol. Nobody accidentally speeds. Nobody accidentally, talks on their cell phone while they're driving. These are all things that you should be aware of. And one of the things that changed my life was the fact that when my son was 16, he had to go through the driver's process in Connecticut to get his license. About 2 weeks before he went through this process, there was a young woman in our town that was doing about 90 miles an hour, driving home at night, got involved in an accident, and she was decapitated. And I immediately contacted the state of Connecticut through the Department of Motor Vehicle, the Commissioner of Motor Vehicles office, where I wanted to be on a teen safe driving committee. And I kept calling and kept calling and kept calling. You could never get through. So I called a friend of mine who was a state legislature, and they were making calls. So I called one day, and the legislature's assistant said, I keep calling. Nobody gets back to me. I said, why don't you, I don't want to bother you. Why don't you give me the number? So I had the number to the commissioner's office. So I called relentlessly. Finally, I got through. We had this commission. We did a video. I'm in the video. And we developed a teen safe driving contract. So when your teen starts driving, you go over the contract with them and you have them sign that, setting forth what the repercussions are for any bad behavior. About a year and a half later, my son signed one that said, if I ever drink alcohol and drive a car, I will not drive. I will forfeit my right to drive a car until I'm 18. So he goes to a concert in Hartford. He's not driving. He goes up there and he has 2 beers, and the person that is driving can't drive because they had like 18 beers. So my son says, I feel okay, I'll drive. He tells me the next day, I had to drive because the other one wasn't driving and I had 2 beers. So I pulled out his contract. I said, remember signing this? He goes, but if I didn't drive, I said, do you remember signing this? Well, you wouldn't have known about this unless I told you. Do you remember signing this? Yes. You're done driving. You have lost your ability to operate a motor vehicle until you're 18. He was probably 17 and a half at the time. A giant pain in the ass because we had to drive him around. But I wanted to make a point with him to say, this is that important that there's no going back on this.
There is no, but there is no but.
Right.
There is no if, because if he would, well, he did drive. That accident could have occurred and someone could have died. Would him telling you, Dad, I only had 2 change that outcome? No. So, I mean, I can't imagine the look on his face when you made him honor that contract. What kind of backlash did you get from your son?
I really didn't get much backlash. And it's because I talk about cases that form this type of resilience in my mind. So we had a case where 4 kids were in a car. They were going to class. The driver of the car is going too fast, goes around a corner, hits a telephone pole sideways as he's spinning. The young woman who is 17 in the back of the car goes straight up in the car. Her spine is crushed. She is a quadriplegic. And I went to visit her in the hospital. And I went out to my car after I visited with her and her family members, and I sat there and I cried. And I thought to myself, how, as a parent, do you go on knowing that your child is a quadriplegic? So when my kids want to argue with me about stuff like this, I'll tell them, stop. I've seen too many awful things involving irresponsible behavior to say, all right, let's give you a pass on this. Because if I gave him a pass on that, what does that have to say?
Exactly.
That this type of behavior can be rationalized.
This contract is really not a contract. It's more of a suggestion.
Exactly. And the other thing we did is we said, we have a safe word. So if anyone calls, any of my kids call the house, regardless of what time it is, and say the word strawberry in the sentence, that means they're in a situation that's dangerous, that I will go and pick them up regardless of the time, regardless of what's going on, regardless if they're throwing up because they've had too much to drink. I will bring them home. There will be no conversation about what happened, how it happened. The only conversation will be about reviewing bad behavior. And that, not that that happened, that they had to use that term, but just knowing that they would never have to worry about getting in trouble for doing something incredibly irresponsible. And it's easy to do irresponsible stuff when we're with our peers.
Oh, without a doubt.
I mean, we might think, oh, I'm not supposed to do this, or I'm going to go home, or dad said this, or mom said that. But when you're with your peers, oh, come on, oh, smoke a little pot. Oh, let's do this, let's do that. And we talked before we started this about like the incredibly irresponsible things we did as kids. And if my kids ever told me that they did something like I did when I was younger, that'd be the end of it. And my kids are adults now, but it would be like, what on earth are you thinking? And there are just too many horrible, horrible things that can go on. And when you see death, and when you see, mayhem, and when you see a young woman who is a quadriplegic, they know that we're not going to have a conversation about the one bite at the apple rule. There is no one bite. It's one and done.
Yeah, I mean, just the outcome of our actions, and it says a lot about your kids, and it says about a lot about you as a father and your upbringing and your responsibilities as a father. That because here, when I said, well, what was that the pushback, and you said there really wasn't one. I was like, oh, okay, because you did things the right way as a parent. Where first of all, he told you. Where he didn't have to. So
Right.
That just shows respect as to the father. So that says a lot about you. And unfortunately, there's a lot of kids, a lot of families that don't have that. So that says a lot about you.
And, as part of this group, they have these rules. And I think it applies across the board in any type of rule situation that you have 80% of the people that will follow the rules. 10% on the top will be like hyper vigilant about the rules, and 10% at the bottom will be so irresponsible that you can't even connect with them. So in the kids in Connecticut, if you're below 18, that you can drive a car, but you have to have someone that over 18 with you. So some of these irresponsible parents would go to parties with their kids, would drink until they get intoxicated, and then have their kid drive home. And the interesting thing is there's studies that have shown that kids will generally mirror or mimic the behavior of their parents in driving. So if you have parents that are hyper vigilant about how they drive, you follow the speed limit, you stop at a stop sign, you don't go through yellow lights, your kids generally will be like that. If you're drinking, if you're speeding, if you're doing all these other things, your kids will be like that as well.
Yeah, they see when you talk about when they're little, how they're like a sponge. That never stops. They're like a sponge. They're just picking up more and more of the habits that, are that, and showing that there are, repercussions for our actions. And you being an attorney and seeing these and being able to share them, the intensity of them, because sometimes what happens is, they hear about it, but they don't see it. And you see it, and you see the end result with the victim, the families who are the defendants. You see all sides. And I can't even imagine some of the stories of the horrific things. Well, just the girl alone. I mean, paraplegic, 17 years old? Mm-hmm. Life's over. Well, it's not
quadriplegic.
Over. It's okay. And the life is not over, but as she knew it, it is. And how, as a driver of that vehicle, who sometimes the driver always ends up fine, or the drunk who hits somebody is usually without a scratch while he kills a whole family. Mm-hmm. Trying to get that through to people and for you to do that contract, and you said that's in Connecticut?
In Connecticut,
you came up with that?
So
is that still active now?
So if you go on the website, I think it's, you just Google Department of Motor Vehicles, Teen Safe Driving, and there's a section where you can get lots of different resources that can assist you as a parent. But that's a huge one in my mind, because if you sit down with your child, with your teenager, and say, these are my expectations of you, and this is such a big step in that you're going to be entrusted with something that can literally kill someone, that there's certain responsibilities, very weighty responsibilities that go with this. And if you violate those rules, there are going to be very, very serious repercussions.
And see, for you to be able to break it down with that way that you wrote everything up, and black and white, and not sugarcoating everything, is such a positive way of reinforcement, because there's no misunderstanding. Or like sometimes when you're having a talk with a child, or I don't have any kids, so I have that right to say in this manner, but it's like this gray area. Well, you didn't say it like that, Dad. Well, they can't do that with you. You're an attorney, man. It's like, I got precedence. But, to do that and to be able to put it in black and white, these are the rules. There is no gray area in the rules. Is there something like that? I'm from Detroit, Michigan. Is this only in Connecticut as far as what
I don't know the answer to that. I would hope not. But anyone can go on the Department of Motor Vehicles website and download that.
Okay.
And the person that I drafted that with is an attorney, and his son at the age of 17 died in a car accident. So you want to talk about developing something with a real feeling behind it. And the thought is that if you could save one person's life, if you could have one family not go through what this particular gentleman and his family went through, what a gift that would be.
Now, you said the one who drafted this with you, his 17-year-old passed. Now, was this before or after?
Before.
Man.
And that's what brought him to the group.
Unbelievable, man. That's just, some of the cases, too, I think people underestimate the severity of the punishment. I know when I was younger, you get caught drinking and driving. I remember when I was, like I said, I'm 59. I remember being 16, 17, 18, just getting my license, getting pulled over with open beer in the car, getting out of the car, the officer put it on the roof, and then he'd say, pour it out. Okay, get out of here. I mean, that was back in the day. You always hear people, back in the day, we just had to dump it out and we got a little talking to. So it was like, well, hell, I got away with that. So there was no repercussions. Where now you got the drunk, the super drunk, and all these laws. For the people out there, these kids who think that, well, I could call Richard. He'll get me out of this. These laws are made with loopholes. What do you have to tell them as far as what's true and false about that?
So my practice now is 100% personal injury. But years ago, I used to do, criminal motor vehicle work. And I remember getting a call from a mother who said to me, my son was behind Starbucks and, they were smoking pot back there. And then the cops were waiting and pulled him over. So I want to hire you. I want you to get this case dismissed. I want you to do everything you have to do because, he shouldn't have been arrested. They entrapped him. And I said to her, you are talking to the wrong attorney about this. I said, let's back up a little bit here and let me ask you a couple of questions. Your kid is sitting behind Starbucks in a motor vehicle smoking pot, and then he's going to drive that motor vehicle and he could kill one of my kids or kill somebody else, and you want me to just get the case thrown out because you think there's entrapment? Is there any responsibility on your part to have a conversation with your child about the incredibly poor judgment that this kid showed that night? And she said, I really didn't think about it that way. And I can just imagine this kid comes home, tells his mother, and she's all up in arms about the cop. Forget about the fact that you're in my car smoking pot and then you're going to drive home. It's just mind-boggling the way some parents act. And my daughter, my oldest daughter, when she was in high school, would go to these parties where the parents would be home and would allow these kids to drink. And then these kids would drive home. And there have been cases in our town where parents have let kids drink, kids leave the party, and then somebody gets either seriously injured or killed. If you just take the death part, which is the horrific worst part, and put it aside and look at the parents of the ones that had the party, they could lose everything in that one night. Their house, their savings, everything gone. Forgetting about the fact that their child and their conduct is responsible for the death of a young person. It's just so irresponsible how people are.
That's just crazy. I've been involved in those growing up. I remember when I graduated high school, we're 18 years old. You're under the legal age to drink. But yet when we graduated high school, we'd go to all the graduation parties. The parents are buying kegs. There's an open bar. We're 18. And it was just acceptable. And, just the difference, now and then. And then you'll hear the difference with the different laws and all that come into play. Has got to be another thing that what can you break down as far as what people can expect? Because they're like, what is too much as far as impaired to drunk to super drunk to a misdemeanor to a felony is what the limits are.
Sure. So in Connecticut, I think it's .08 currently, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't done this in a long, long time.
That's for impaired.
So, no, in Connecticut, we don't have like they have in New York, driving while impaired or driving under the influence.
Oh, okay.
But nowadays, it wasn't the case 20 years ago. You have Uber. Why on earth would you go to a party and not take an Uber? Or why would you go to a party and not be driven there in an Uber if you know you're going to drink? Because let's assume you just get pulled over for a DUI and you go through some kind of a program and it gets erased from your record for purposes of the Department of Motor Vehicles. Your insurance company will see this. So maybe you have to pay a lawyer $2,500 to represent you. And then in addition to that, your insurance rates go way up because of this driving while intoxicated. People have no idea, and that's assuming you don't kill anybody or seriously injure somebody. So it just makes so much sense to do the right thing for so many reasons.
And that's just it too. Nowadays, I talk to people who have kids, and I'm talking about drinking and driving. And they're like, well, my daughter, my son, they were at these parties, and they were pretty intoxicated there. And it's like, oh, they're telling you all this? And, well, yeah, they didn't drive, like you just said. Now Uber, the share rides, everything are all over the place. So it's not the fact drinking's not illegal. Being drunk's not illegal. Doing certain activities, drinking and driving, is illegal. So back when I was younger, we didn't have these outlets. So now there's no reason to get behind that wheel. There's no reason at all. What type of jail time are people facing for these?
So there's
I
certain
know they
types.
change.
There's certain types of pretrial diversionary programs. So if it's your first DUI, or if it's your first DUI in, say, in 10 years, you can get into certain programs depending upon the situation where you can get through the program and then it's wiped off your record. I know years ago that if you got arrested for a DUI and you had a commercial driver's license, that you would lose your commercial operator's license. So if you're a truck driver, you drive, commercial vehicles for a living, you're done. So, there are many, many reasons why this is so incredibly bad. And that doesn't even take into account what happens if you seriously injure somebody. What happens if you kill somebody? How do you – I can't even imagine what it would be like waking up the next day with a pounding headache and a massive hangover and then having somebody tell you you killed somebody the night before.
We were talking before going live about, for me, that we would always justify our actions by looking at others. It's like, you drink too much. Well, I don't drink as much as, so-and-so, but who is out with us. Well, he's fallen down drunk. At least I'm not falling down drunk. Well, he's missing work. At least I'm not. We're making excuses to up that bar of stupidity. And as we were talking before, too, I remember going through the checklist, waking up, pounding headache, like, oh, shit, and almost making a joke of it, going through the checklist. Okay, this is my room. I'm in one piece, going to the living room, looking out the blinds. Truck's there. Oh, shit, I got to go out and do the walk around to make sure it's not smashed. And then afterwards laughing about it. I just had to do a checklist. And I don't remember driving home because I was so drunk. And the repercussions of these accidents and all that, I can deal. I always said, thank God. I was never in an accident killing or hurting anybody when I was under the influence. I know people who have. And there is no sentencing as far as legal actions that would ever take away from knowing that I ended someone's life. Doing what I do in my fight or hearing these stories about I killed somebody, just having to deal with that 24/7 has got to be just unimaginable.
I remember in the late 1980s, I received a call at, I think it was probably 1:30 in the morning, New Year's Day. And a client called. He was in the state police prison, in the state police jail. He had hit somebody on the highway that night, rear-ended them, and killed them. And I went to visit him, and he was sitting in the cell, and he was just convulsing and shaking, and he kept saying, "She can't be dead. She can't be dead. She can't be dead. She can't be dead." And I thought to myself, oh my God, for one night of fun, drinking too much, getting behind the wheel of a car, and ending somebody's life.
And a lot of times, it's always an innocent victim when you are the one that causes this. And like I said, the people that I've interviewed and hearing that, what you just described was almost haunting and almost gave me chills because it's like that. 1 minute we're having fun, next minute we're leaving the party, next minute we're driving down the road laughing, next minute your life and someone else's life is over. And to live with that the rest of your life has just got to be unbelievable. And we all have people. Well, I should say that I've got a lot of people who are part of my personal family, my extended family, who have gone through this, and hearing their stories off camera, and the pain, and so a lot of times on camera, showing and sharing different things because they want people to understand the severity of this. I don't know if you could share any of the stories from with your clients or some of the stories that. The remorse that is just unspeakable. I don't even know the right words to put into it of how they can. You can't deal or you can't make excuses for that, or to try to make yourself feel okay. And now, okay is not even the right word. I hope you know where I'm trying to get.
I do,
with this.
And we're on the other side, so we don't speak with the drivers of these vehicles. We speak with the victims and the victims' families. But the worst ones are when you're dealing with the parents of a young person that's killed as a result of a drinking driver or a drugging driver. And the rage as a parent that you must feel is something that is all-consuming, because if that other driver had not been drinking or had not been drugging, your child would be there. And for, like I was saying, one night of fun, you have not only ended someone's life, but you've destroyed a family. And then the driver's family will be equally as, they'll be caught up in the mix of this as well. I mean, if, God forbid, your son or daughter kills somebody, how do you even process that information? And then what is it? Let's assume that your son is so drunk that they cause an accident that kills somebody. I don't know that you can just go up to your son and say, it's going to be okay. Everything's fine.
That's
I love
what I was
you.
going at. How do you say it's?
I don't think you do, because they have made the ultimate mistake that has resulted in the ultimate consequence, the death of somebody, and now they are going to pay the ultimate price on their end and perhaps go to jail for a long period of time, and you have two families that are in very, very bad shape because of that.
Yeah, and I've had people that I've talked to on our show, and they have been on both ends. Mm-hmm. There are people who have caused accidents from being intoxicated, who have killed people, and people who have lost people because of that. And hearing the different sides and the people who are alive and that caused the accident, who are doing amazing things, trying to bring awareness so this never happens to someone else, and then still speaking with the families of someone who was killed, talking to them and saying, how do you feel about that? And they're like, you get the honest answer sometimes, and, which is, I fucking hate them. I wish they were dead because of the ultimate anger. You took my child, and you're out doing public speaking. Mm-hmm. But then the faith part of it, whatever comes in, they're like, this happened for a reason, and this person is talking about my son or my daughter. But I can't imagine, I don't have any kids, so I can't imagine. Well, I can imagine, but I don't have the full capacity. Like that night when your son, and you had to break out that contract, all these things that we were just talking about, that could have been your son.
Right. And for me, if I can prevent, I can try to prevent that in my house first, and then through the contract, help to prevent that in other houses. But our default, Mandy, is to say, I'm sorry. So when we do something wrong, when we err, when we hurt someone, when we make a mistake, our go-to is to say, I'm sorry. When you kill somebody as a result of drinking and being intoxicated, there is no I'm sorry. That's thrown out the window. So let's just think about that person for a minute. Now, you're the person that caused somebody's death because of your drinking and your intoxication. I don't even know how you kind of wrap your mind around what you did, how grossly irresponsible it is, how you've completely destroyed one person's family, and now what do you say to your mother? What do you say to your father? You would think that you'd want to say, I'm sorry, but that just doesn't address it.
There's no word or words strong enough to sit there and to be in that. God bless these people, because that's the only thing I can think of right now, to be in that position that you took someone's life, and to know every day that you are alive, that you're breathing, that you are seeing your family, your loved ones. I can't even imagine the guilt that must be overwhelming, thinking when you're alone, I'm at this party, this mother's not having a birthday party for her son or daughter because of my actions. And that has got to be so overwhelming, the pain that these people feel. God bless counseling and recovery groups for this, because it's just unmanageable, unthinkable of how that feels.
And I just think it's so important that, especially parents, because it all kind of flows down from the parents, especially with younger people, that you have to realize the importance of making these really, really bad decisions. And you have to have conversations with your kids about this, and you have to have rules set up, because you don't ever want to be that parent that gets the call that your child has been killed, and you certainly don't want to get the call where you find out your child killed somebody.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, that's just it's when it comes to that, and when it comes to just the one last thing before we wrap up here is you were talking about drinking and driving, drugging and driving. Now, with everything with marijuana and the legality of it and the edibles and all the different ways that you can legally get it, what are the truths and myths about marijuana and driving?
So the last I had read up on this is that it's very difficult to tell if somebody is intoxicated as a result of, using marijuana or perhaps eating edibles. Mm-hmm. So a lot of it is like field sobriety tests where the police officer on the scene, makes notes of things that aren't right, slurred speech or delayed reactions or the nystagmus test or walking the line or saying the alphabet or many, many different things that would indicate whether or not the person is coherent.
So it's basically like the same field test.
Right.
To go for probable cause to take them in for blood work and stuff like that.
Right. So the objective findings would be you give your blood and there's a blood alcohol level. Mm-hmm. The subjective tests are what the subject is doing, how they're walking the line. Okay. Can they pick their 1 foot up and count to 10? Can they recite the alphabet? Can they, whatever it is that they're asked to do?
Okay. I mean, it is such a, with subjects like this, you could go on for hours and hours and days trying to make sense of things that have happened when really there's only one way. It's just don't do it.
Right. And I think the point that I'd really like to hammer home for all the listeners here is the fact that bad decisions can result in horrific consequences. So with Uber, with having your friends with you, with choices and options that you have to make, don't ever put yourself in the position where you're that person, that you either killed somebody or that your family member has been killed because of somebody else. But we all have decisions that we can make, and it's so important, especially for going out, call an Uber. And then if you don't drink too much, you spent money on an Uber. If you have had too much to drink, you don't have to worry about driving home.
Exactly. It's the options are there. Use them. Mm-hmm. And I tell you, Richard, thank you so much. There's so much more that just hearing you talk while you were talking about different things, different cases that were going through my mind. I definitely would like to keep in touch, especially with My Fight or War. I get a lot of people that ask different questions about the legalities and laws, but more than that, though, as a parent,
right?
And the way that I love the way you handled that with your son, and the contract, and standing by that contract and not bending. But as a lawyer, you're not going to do that. But I just give you so much credit. And again, thank you so much for coming on. And I know that you do a lot of work with social media and all that. So can you please let people know where they could follow you?
Certainly. So my website for my law practice is hcwlaw.com. It's Hastings, Cohan, and Walsh. I also do speaking. I've written 26 books. I talk about goal setting. I do a lot of different things. But I mean, I was so excited to talk to you and so excited right now about, if we could just help one person, not be the victim or the person that perpetrates this type of horror on somebody else. This is time very, very well spent.
And I tell you, I am so happy and proud that you took the time to come on the show, because the listeners and the viewers pick up on certain things, and you hit on so many different levels as an attorney, as a human being, and as a father, that you covered it. And that's why I'd really like to keep in touch too, because I know once I get home and once I start checking my messages, there's going to be a lot of questions, and we'll definitely keep in touch. And I'm from Detroit. We come back here every 6 weeks and we do shows, but I do live. I've got no problem going on to Facebook. So you're more than welcome, and we'll definitely keep in touch.
I would love that. Thanks, Manny.
So thank you. And once again, thank you for being part of My Fight or War. I'm Manny Vitale. Until next time, keep fighting the good fight.